Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Talk With. I'm Roy Guest, aka Wrestling Productions, and I'm here with the one and only Joseph Lister. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Joseph Lidster, or Joe. Call me Joe.
Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I was just about to take a sip from a cup of tea because I forgot I was doing this. Yeah, no, I'm all right. I think, like everyone, I've got a permanent cold and just permanently
Yeah,
tired. But certainly doing better than we were a couple of years ago. So yeah, no, I'm all right.
that's good to hear. I too have a cold as well, for anyone watching, by the way, and I'm always getting a cold when it comes to these podcasts. When I was talking to Sophie Aldred, I had the flu, which was interesting. It's always an interesting experience doing podcasts with cold.
Yeah.
Anyway, first thing I kind of want to ask you about is your work on the Sarah Jane Adventures, because I grew up with the Sarah Jane Adventures myself. And your stories in particular resonate with me growing up and were, a huge part in me getting into the creative industry as a whole, and
Well,
especially the Nightmare Man. The Nightmare Man as an episode stands out to me a lot. I just wondered what was your experience writing that, and what was your experience, uh, kind of unrelated question, but what was your experience getting into the industry yourself?
okay, so getting into the industry was long and complicated. And there's no use for anyone who's trying to get into the industry because I think everybody does it in different ways. So I wanted to be an actor. I wasn't sure I was particularly good enough, but also we did a school production of Amadeus, the play, and I got a good role in it and think I was pretty good at it. But I think I realised at that point the reason I'm very good at it is because it's an amazing script. Whereas all the scripts we'd done up until then had been fun. They'd been
Mm,
musicals or they'd been light-hearted things or certainly things aimed more at kids and that kind of thing. And I hadn't necessarily really cottoned on to the fact that scripts existed as a format that could be have as much depth as a novel.
yeah.
Obviously, I'd studied English literature, and things are a bit. We're talking 30 odd years ago, so media was less of a thing to
Mm,
be studied. But then I went to university and did study media, and yeah, I left that, no idea what to do. Worked in telesales and knew about Big Finish, who do these Doctor Who plays, and decided to send them in an idea. I wasn't listening to them because I didn't really have the internet to buy them on and couldn't afford them. Um, so I didn't really know what they were doing. I think I'd heard
mm,
one, which I'd got as a present. But I thought, well, sent in an idea. I had this idea for a story. I think crucially, the idea for the story wasn't particularly a Doctor Who story. It was a story I wanted to do, sort of
yeah.
exploring mental health and drugs and the big thing I was into at the time, which was clubbing.
Mm,
And so pitched that to them. They liked it, so it got made. Nobody else liked it, but luckily I'd been commissioned to write a second story before the Rapture came out, the first one.
mm,
Anyway, I did a few years at Big Finish, and then I met James Goss, who at that point was doing the BBC websites. Doctor Who had come back, so he'd done the first sort of 2005 Who is Doctor Who and
mm,
things like that. And he came up to me in the pub and said, really liked your Unit The Longest Night, which was a
mm,
play I wrote for Big Finish in 2004, 2005, presumably, yeah.
mm.
And so he offered me some work, and that's when I became sort of a full time writer. Because then I started to write the spin off websites for Doctor Who. So
Yeah.
every week you had a different game
Mm. I mean,
introduced by Mickey from Who is Doctor Who.
I absolutely loved those games growing up and those sort of oddity websites. I absolutely loved them because it sort of made the show feel more real.
Hmm.
It had like a presence, like every website that was on like the show, it come to life. It
Yeah.
was it was really, really fun, a really fun time for the show as well, for websites, that
Mm.
I really, really enjoyed. And as for your audio work, of course, I'll get back to Nightmare Man in a bit. But in terms of your audio work, one that stands out to me that I cried at, I absolutely was in tears at, was A Full Life. A Full
Oh
Life in
yeah.
particular is I always recommend that as I always recommend that to people, especially people who when it comes to Adric,
Hmm.
either impartial or loved them or didn't like them. I always recommend that as a really, really great Adric story. What was it like kind of delving into his character for that story in particular?
So it's quite interesting because I'm friends with Ian Atkins, who is
Mm.
producing the Short Trips range, and I'm also friends with Matthew Waterhouse, who plays
Mm.
Adric. And I produced a range at Big Finish called Dark Shadows, a
Yeah.
different series, and we knew Matthew was a big fan of that. Matthew at the time hadn't done any Big Finish, and we said we got Matthew into Dark Shadows, so we got him
Mm.
to do audio drama. And then I suggested to Ian, or Ian asked me, what had Matthew been like, or whatever. And I said, Matthew, oh, he's a great laugh. Matthew's very, very funny man.
Mm.
And and it sort of came about by then. And I think, as I am at times, I was busy. I was getting a lot of TV work at the time, for children's TV, and I tend to be more now sort of I for Big Finish, because I believe you should always try and look for new stuff. For Big Finish, I tend to only do ask to do stuff. I say to them, please, can I do something? Because I'd really like to write for this. And I really wanted to do a short trip.
Mm.
I love the idea of doing a one person script. And because it does also allow you to do something a bit more character led.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to do that. And so I suggested to Ian, um, or Ian said he got Matthew, and then he said, I'm just going to get two writers. And I said, actually, I'd really like to do that. I think that'd be a really fun experience to write for one actor. And it was so much fun. And I knew one thing I really liked about working with Matthew on Dark Shadows is his modern day voice.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought I would like to do something like that. I'd like to do something um, where he's not pretending to be Adric, the sort of teenager.
Mm.
And also, yeah, it ties into my whole thing. I love It's a Wonderful Life, the film It's a Wonderful
Yeah.
Life, things like
Yeah.
that. I kind of just thought it would be a fun idea. It would be
Mm.
something. It's sometimes quite nice to play around with the fact that we know a character's fate. So what
Yeah.
happens
What
to
happened
them
if they didn't? What happened
when
if
we know that's not going to happen?
Yeah, I mean it's a wonderful idea and execution was absolutely heartbreaking. I mean I loved it from beginning to end. And I think uh I love your emphasis throughout your scripts on mental health. I think that's
Mm.
yeah, it's always been a whenever I've watched it, I've watched any of your stuff, it's always been a strong emphasis on that. What's it like kind of writing those themes into audios and children's TV in particular? What's it like writing about mental health in children's TV?
So I think it's for me, it's not necessarily explicitly about mental health. It's about telling people if you're not
Mm.
feeling great. It's about confiding in people, and also about celebrating life, living every day like it's your last, because you don't know when it's your last. So about exploring all that.
Mm.
So I first realised I had depression in my early 20s, but then was diagnosed with anxiety the year before last. So I've got the double whammy. I'm doing great, but surviving. And I
Mm.
think that's very
Yeah.
much my thing. Is it's about going. These things aren't the end of the world. These are things you live with. Um, and my big issue for me is about talking. You should talk to people, because I've been there when I first was ill. I couldn't talk to people. I didn't know, what do you
Yeah.
say? I mean, again, the world has moved on, thankfully.
Mm.
People are more open now about such things. Um, but for me, I think I just really enjoy sort of writing scripts that are hopefully quite fun and a bit
Yeah.
of a laugh. And then you realize there's actually a lot more going on, and then they get quite sad, but then hopefully with an uplifting ending, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think there's a it relates to a later question that I want to ask, but I think having fun while writing something with a deeper meaning is the best reason for writing. I think it's definitely my reason for whenever I write. And I think one scene in particular that I think highlights everything you just said that you've written is the car scene between Sarah Jane and Luke in The Nightmare Man
Oh
when
yeah.
that that always made me cry growing up as well. A lot of your scripts make me cry,
Oh,
but
I had to
in a
quite
good
not
way.
fight for that scene, but I had to. It was quite a tough scene to get done
Mm,
because the Sarah Jane Adventures, the clue's in the title, it's an adventure.
yeah,
So, and with kids' TV, they tend to be, your scripts tend to be about 26, 27 pages, and they're quite strict because it's got to be. Um,
yeah,
there's a whole load of other factors of when, if there's a child actor, which I think Luke still was at that point, I think Tommy still was
yeah.
under child labour laws or whatever it is, so he could only work certain hours. Um, there's all sorts of factors go into it. And actually, one thing you don't really get to do is write a scene of two people talking that isn't necessarily advancing the plot. And I
Yeah,
think I had to really fight, well, not necessarily fight, but had to justify its inclusion because kids' TV tends not to do that. It doesn't tend to sit down and just have people talk. Certainly not in the middle of a
mm.
story. You might have a wrap up at the end, like I do at the end of Mark of the
I
Berserker.
was going to ask you
Where,
about that
yeah,
particularly.
but
Yeah.
that's at the end of the story. That's literally a 30-second scene or whatever at the end of the story.
Mm.
This is in the middle of the story, and it's yeah, it was quite a it was a challenge because it meant I had to make sure the rest of the script was so tight and that there was enough going on that we could go, you know what, it's okay. Kids aren't going to switch over if it's just two people talking in a car.
Yeah, and I think you were really successful in that. I think
Mm.
it's definitely important to have those kind of scenes in
Mm.
children's TV in particular. I think that's what made the Sarah Jane Adventures so special, in that it was a TV show that could do that. And I think there were a lot of children's TV that I know you wrote for around that time, such as Winter Space Aliens, that did do that as well. But I think there
Mm.
was just something so special about the Sarah Jane Adventures to me growing up in particular, and
Yeah.
so many. And yeah, that was such a beautiful scene. Now I have a question, sort of similar to that, from a friend of the podcast and also a podcast you've been on from Jack Alexander.
All
Uh,
right.
yeah, he asked me to ask you. So much of your Who work is getting down to the characters at their core. Master from the Master, Owen in a Day of the Death, Day in the Death, sorry, and the gang in your Sarah Jane Adventures episodes. Which Doctor Who character would you love to break down, given the chance? I'd also add Adric to that and uh, Captain Jack and Yanto and Broken. But yeah, what character would you like to kind of break down if you given the chance?
It's quite interesting because I suppose what I'm drawn to are the characters who aren't necessarily the heroes.
Mm.
So Adric isn't hugely popular all the time. Um, Owen's awful. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
Owen's not a nice bloke.
he is
Um,
awful
but
person.
I know, ignoring the worst things he does, I'm possibly more likely to be friends with Owen than I am with Gwen.
Mm.
Because, and
I mean,
certainly than I would be with Jack. I
yeah.
find those characters, certainly, I feel like they're more interesting.
Mm.
Um, because it's interesting to explore those people. And also, it ties into a bit what you were saying earlier on, which I hadn't necessarily thought about before about the mental health thing. Um, those are very explicitly characters who won't say that something's wrong.
Yeah.
And that instantly
Yeah.
gives you drama. Owen is never going to sit down and go, well, listen, I'm feeling a bit down.
Mm.
Owen's going to swear at you and, tell you to F off.
Yeah.
So those are more interesting characters. Like, who else would I do? Um, so I think of the new series, if there's anyone. Um, uh, I mean, I always found Mickey an interesting character,
He was.
um,
Yeah.
which would be harder
Well,
these
yeah.
days.
Harder these days. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I don't know. I mean, I enjoy, any character really. And to be honest, I don't mean that as a bad sort of answer, but I think if you
no,
gave me any
nice.
character and went, we want a character piece about them, I'd
Yeah.
find that really interesting to do. Because I think every character has the side you don't necessarily expect them to have. Um, like who the heck is Mel? What is she?
Mm.
What's going on there? Perry is very interesting because I just think with Perry, you've got such a great actress playing a character who is written as quite one note,
And I think that
but whose
that's
backstory isn't one note. She's got quite
yeah.
interesting backstory and interests and stuff.
I think that's what Big Finish does so well. I think
Mm.
that's one of the main things Big Finish does so well is expanding upon that. Well,
Yes.
it is an expanded universe, but I find it interesting your take on like the worst people getting these stories and going into them because I very much agree. I think it makes for a very interesting story, and I think even when taking a character like Gwen and having her admit that she is an awful person,
Mm.
Miracle Day pretty much is that. I
Yeah.
think that's when those characters become very interesting to me and very because Gwen is an awful person. I think
Yeah.
that's she
Gwen's
is an awful,
incredibly
awful
she's
person.
incredibly self-centered and
Yeah.
arrogant. I'd love to go drinking with her though, because she's also brilliant and
Mm.
funny and clever and smart. But it's one of
Yeah.
those brilliant things, and it's certainly a big thing with Russell, where you go, every single character Russell creates,
Mm.
nobody's perfect. Not one of them is perfect, and they all have flaws. And
Yeah.
I loved doing. I did a couple of short trips about Jackie, and they were great fun because Jackie's not a hero. She's got no interest in being a hero. She'll defend her daughter, but she won't defend the Earth. That's not her job. And
Mm.
so it was great doing a story, a Doctor Who story, about someone who's got no interest in being in Doctor Who.
Mm.
She's like, no, I don't want to be in Doctor Who. I'm. This is the worst world. Don't put me in this story. And it's great doing something with someone like that who doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
Again, it's just great fun.
Yeah, I think that's what interests me about series two as well, and Russell's world as a whole. I mean, when I watch series two of the new series, I pay a lot of attention to Jackie and Mickey because I feel like
Mm.
those arcs in particular are very interesting to me. And while Rose's arc is still interesting and very watchable and very enjoyable, I absolutely love Jackie's and Mickey's arcs, and
Mm.
I love the fact that Russell was able to balance them. I think that
Yeah.
takes incredible talent as a writer, and yeah, and there is a sort of in Russell's world, in like the Sarah Jane Adventures and Doctor Who and Torchwood, I liked the idea that with like the Mad Woman in the Attic, the script you wrote for
Mm.
Rani, I noticed when watching it, there's quite a bit of a comparison to Martha's arc in how that in when I watch it, like Rani feels overshadowed by Maria,
Mm.
uh Martha feels overshadowed by Rose. Uh, but what was it like writing that episode? Because I've always loved that episode in particular. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. I love every single one of your Sarah Jane
Oh,
Adventures
thank
episodes.
you.
But what's it like writing the Man in the Attic and that mental health aspect of that? Because I find that particularly interesting.
That was an interesting one because taking Clyde on a journey was easy.
Mm,
Not easy, it was hard, but working out what Clyde's route would be is
yeah.
quite straightforward. Clyde is afraid of sharing his feelings. Clyde's a lad. Um, Clyde wants to impress the dad the dad who he hates and hates and
Mm,
hates for leaving him. One scene with the dad, and suddenly he's like, this man's cool. And I'll break all the rules to show him because that Clyde thinks he needs the father figure. It's often about what the characters want and need. Clyde wants his dad. What Clyde really needs to understand is that his dad just isn't right for him. His dad shouldn't be a permanent fixture in his life. With Rani, it was a bit harder because she had less of a not character. I mean, I suppose we'd known her a year short.
mm.
We hadn't known her at all, did we?
Not at that point, I don't think.
No, yeah. Well, we know we'd known her 1 year, hadn't we? She was in Mark the Berserker, so we'd
Yeah.
known her a year. But also, she's got a much more conventional home setup. She's also
Mm,
very intelligent, very bright, very funny. She's often quite in control and everything. So it was quite hard to sort of go, well, where do we go? And I thought, and actually, where we went down the route was that when you're a teenager, well, when you're an adult, crikey, it never goes away. But just one wrong phrase from somebody else can send you spiraling. And that's what it was for Rani. The others have never, ever sat in front of her and talked about Maria, comparing them or anything like that. But Rani just had that bad morning. and
Mm.
that set her off, and that coincided with other things. But it was also for me drawing on the other aspects of Rani that I felt could be explored. Like she's very impulsive. She
Yeah.
will act without thinking. She isn't perfect, you know. She acts without thinking. She did stop messaging a friend of hers. You know,
Mm.
she does have different shades to her. But it was much more of a challenge. It's much more of a challenge to go, well, what's the actual inciting incident for this story? And what we went was just one morning of hearing um, the bad stuff or mishearing something. You know, that's
Yeah.
also something that really impacted on my depression was overhearing someone talking about me and me totally taking it out of context.
Mm.
And it was like very much I did that with the Nightmare Man when Luke was coming down the stairs and here's Sarah Jane.
And Sarah Jane, yeah.
At that point, he's not hearing it out of context because it's a nightmare, so she is being. But it's about overhearing things, taking things out of context, and yeah, that just sends Rani spiraling. And I suspect that part of that was I mean, it's a long time ago, but part of that might have been responsible for the creation of old Rani and that whole
Mm.
future storyline
And
was
that was
because
a
I
great
thought,
structure, the structural device there. That was great. I mean, what I like about that story in particular is that there's sort of no enemy in it. There's no
yeah,
foe to vanquish. It's such a different story from, and I think that goes back to kind of what you were talking about earlier, in how there is this sort of structure to a children's TV show. There is this. Oh, sorry to sorry for interrupting, by the way. But like, what was it like getting this episode in particular across without this sort of it's not got that kind of constant action. It's not got the your typical enemy. Was it any more difficult to get across than your kind of standard
but
episode?
I know what you mean, but it does have a lot of mystery. There's a
Mm,
lot of mystery. Who is the mysterious red girl and things like that, and it's got chilling scenes of
yeah,
possessed
yeah.
people on fairground rides, and is the old man dodgy or whatever. So it's kind of more of a mystery setup. But you're right about it not having a baddie. The baddie actually is nobody talking to each other.
Mm,
If Rani had told them where she was going, that could have been sorted. If her old mate had confided her and said, "I'm feeling really down," it could all have been sorted. Had the can't remember the character Harry, he's called Harry, Brian Miller's character, had he told somebody what was going on in the fairground, it could have all been sorted. So that's what puts everybody in danger. But thankfully, they all come together because they're all, sort of seeking a family. Everybody's looking for family, and I think, Rani is looking for family. Rani was looking for her. She's got her great parents, but she's looking for her own family. And I think that kind of all ties in together of at the beginning of the story, she feels like her family don't love her because they're talking about Maria. And then
mm,
at the end of the story, she has an absolute loving family of her own creation. So yeah, I think it works because what it has is the structure of an adventure of mystery, what's going on in
yeah.
the fairground, spooky scenes, everything like that. So yeah, hopefully it's possibly the script I'm still proudest of because I just think the ending it all comes together really nicely. And I just think I like a happy ending.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those endings that really stood out to me in how happy I was with the flash forward to Rani's future,
Yeah.
which I'd completely forgotten until rewatching it recently. I know you're going to be venturing back into the world of the Sarah Jane Adventures, and of course you can't tell me any spoilers or anything like that, but what's it like kind of going back into the fray of things and writing for Rani and other Sarah Jane Adventures characters again?
It was been brilliant. It was brilliant. It was last year I wrote it. It's out in April, I think, isn't it?
Mm,
And again, it was that thing of me going, "Oh, yes, please, I need to go. I'd love to go back to that world." For me, what was important was that it respected the ethos of the Sarah Jane Adventures, which is life on
yeah.
Earth an adventure too. And so it's very much Rani and Clyde at the age of 30 dealing with life and then dealing with aliens. And it was me that was very important. They shouldn't be off globe trotting, having adventures. They can travel the globe and have adventures, but they should be traveling the globe because of work or because of personal reasons, not because we've heard rumors of an alien spaceship. Let's get there before unit. And for me, that was quite important that it was like that. It's really good. It was really fun to revisit. Um, I'm shameless in my episode. It's full of continuity references. Clyde and Rani haven't seen each other for a while, so there's a lot of catching up. And it introduces their two new special people. So Rani's flatmate and best mate now, I suppose. Good mate is Samira, and Clyde's got a girlfriend, Phoenix. And yeah, so it's about this new friendship forming between the four of them. It's yeah, it was just so much joy and real joy. And I hadn't seen the Sarah Jane Adventures in a few years. I found it quite upsetting to watch because of Liz, you know, and how it all ended. So I hadn't
Yeah.
watched it in years. And so it was nice to go back finally and rewatch it all and just be very happy with what a brilliant show, you
Mm.
know, I was a very small part of, but what a brilliant show I was a part of. What a
Mm.
great show that these people all came together and made.
Yeah, I mean, what was that experience like, rewatching each season? I know I rewatch it annually. It's one of those shows that I always go back to. It's one that that I just absolutely love. And of course, as you mentioned, you worked on it. And I what was it like working on it at the time, and uh with the cast at the time, and just general stories about that time?
It was great. It was very much, we felt like a family. There was all at the same time, you know, there was Torchwood, there was Doctor Who, there was Doctor Who Confidential, there was the website. There was so much happening there, and you'd meet the same people all the time, and you'd go out with the same people. I also felt very young. I was very young in comparison to other people there. Um, but I felt looked after, and yeah, it was really good. Didn't see a huge amount of the cast. Obviously, you kind of don't as the writer. It's always
Yeah.
quite odd going to the wrap party because you're a bit like you're invading someone's work night out. And everybody's very nice, but at the same time,
Mm.
they're there to let their hair down and celebrate the end of it all.
Mm.
They don't necessarily want to talk to somebody they've only met twice before. But we did have a laugh. Really nice bunch of people. Um, and just very lucky of realizing you were working on a really beautifully crafted show that Russell was so there were things like, and they were annoying at the time because they used up word space, but we had to specify whenever a character crossed the road that they looked left and right. Now, I was saying earlier on about the size of a children's TV script. You haven't got time to be
Mm.
wasting time with stage directions, but it was a very clear edict from Russell that children are going to emulate the characters on this show.
Yeah.
And the characters on the show therefore need to look left and right before crossing the road. And that's the care that went into it. So you knew that that care was coming from above you, but also the joy of realizing you were writing for brilliant actors. I think when we realized how funny Angeli was, that she matches Danny in being a comedic actor, you
Mm.
just ended up I'm just quite happy sitting here writing jokes. You know, I'll just sit here and write jokes for half an hour because there was so much joy to write for.
Mm.
You know, when you realised what a great cast you had, there was also the madness of it. You know, I mean, I had to get K9 out of a black hole, and then I had to back him off to Oxford University. But the madness of writing scenes with K9 and Mr. Smith, where they're both supercomputers, they
Mm.
can't just switch off the story. You know, and he'd sit there going through all these hoops, trying to go, well, why doesn't K9 just end the story now? So yeah, just really fun. The writers, we were a little family. You know, sadly Rupert's no longer with us, which was very sad. But you know, we were a family, still in touch. And yeah, just Liz at the center of it. And she was such a fascinating person. She was so um welcoming, genuinely very welcoming, instantly put me at ease because I was terrified at the first time the first read
Mm.
through Mark of the Berserker, because I'd only done one read through before, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying hearing actors say your work. It's really terrifying when it's in a huge room and you've got all the crew there as well, and you've got people
Mm.
from CBBC and all these and all this stuff. And Liz instantly made sure she spoke to me before we did the read through and put me at ease. And then I remember the last time I met her was at the filming of The Nightmare Man, and I went for the day they did the car scene, and they also did Luke's leaving. So it was a day on Bannerman Road. It was a location day on Bannerman Road. And I just remember sitting outside talking to Liz and just really chilled with her. But also, just there was a brilliant bit where she said she was changing the way she acted because of the performances of Tommy, Danny, and Angeli.
Mm.
She'd come from a TV background where it was multi-camera studio. So it was all about finding your mark and doing exactly the same thing on every take. With this, and I saw her do it, I watched her do it with the car scene. She said it had taken her, what was we on, series 4? It had taken her 3 or 4 years to get there. Excuse me. It had taken her 3 or 4 years to get there, but she was relaxing more.
Mm.
She was trying different things on different takes. She was being looser, I think was how she described her. And it was great to watch. It was really fun to watch her in that car scene. She played it quiet on one take. She played it more emotional on another
Yeah.
take. You know, she really, I mean, such a great actress. So yeah, just her at the center of it all. It was a brilliant, brilliant experience.
I think that's a beautiful insight into how she performed as the character, and I think it's definitely reflected in the final product, and that Elizabeth Sladen, who will always be sorely missed by everyone. Uh, that really is a beautiful insight, and going back to the crossing the road thing, I find it funny that as soon as Luke was kind of taken out of the Sarah Jane Adventures, he almost got run over.
Exactly. I don't know if anybody else found that as funny as everybody who worked on the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Uh,
Because also that story has, is that the one where Sarah Jane says
that's
about Mr. Smith about the fanfare?
no, that's the end of time when
Well, she says, I'm sick of that fanfare or something.
no, that was the fanfare was the Stolen Earth Journey's
Yeah,
End. The end of
that
time
was it.
being
Yes, because of
Tennant's last one.
that fanfare. Again, that was a Russell thing because he's so clever. Because we all hated writing the fanfare because the fanfare was 10 seconds of your script used up. So we'd all write every time. I swear our first drafts would be Sarah Jane and Luke walk into the attic. Mr. Smith is open. Mr. Smith says, Sarah Jane, we've heard a split signal from space. And Russell every single time went, no, they go into the attic and then Mr. Smith opens with the fanfare. And it was so like, you know, and then he says, writes the line of, I'm sick of that fanfare. And it's like, yeah, well, you're the one who made us put it in. But he was absolutely right because, of course, kids love the fanfare.
I mean, I
Kids
love the
want to see
fanfare.
that.
I
You know, they want to see that stuff.
I mean, I think that and it's used brilliantly as well because in the Lost Boy, the series 1 finale, of course, when Mr. Smith is revealed to be evil. I don't think it's played as much. So
No,
I love the consistency of it being included. I think it allowed for kind of I think of course the music is such a strong part in connecting to a character.
mm.
I think that definitely helps children connect to a computer. I think,
Yeah,
especially.
and it just it's part of the magic of it. It's part of the
Mm,
um it can sometimes the one thing it's sometimes easy to forget is that it is meant to be magical and
yeah.
sci-fi adventure. And older kids might be caught up in, you know, the angsty character journey that Joe Lidster's written, but younger kids are sitting there going, we want robots, you know, we
Mm.
want a computer that comes out of the wall, we want that magic. So yeah, no, I absolutely believe in everything, you know. Russell knew what he was talking about, obviously.
So, I have another question from Jack Alexander, a friend of mine and the podcast as a whole. It's it's are you so talented at writing because you're so short? The clever particles have less body to move around.
I'm very much average normal height. Jack
Mhm.
is very tall and mean.
Mm. He is
Um,
very tall.
yeah, I've never met him, but he says he's very tall, so I imagine he is
I've met him quite a few times. He is very, very tall.
very tall.
So, moving on from that joke question, for anyone listening, by the way, it's not Jack being genuinely rude. It is there, but of course, you and Jack have because you went on his podcast. What was it like?
Yes.
What is it like going on podcasts from your perspective? I've never really asked that to a guest before.
Do you know what? It's funny because when you first get in, there's a couple of things. Doctor Who is a very, the moment you do something involved in the world of Doctor Who, you become a big fish in a small pond. Literally, the moment you do
Mm,
something, people want your autograph. People
mm,
want things like that, and that's it's not the real world in any way, shape, or form. When I first started writing for Big Finish, I lived in Dublin and worked in car finance, and I would come back. I remember one example specifically of flying over to sign autographs, flying back to London to sign autographs in a shop, and then going back to work on Monday, and people being like, why? Why do people want your autograph? You're just Joe, because it's such a weird thing to be involved in. So it's still weird doing stuff like
mm.
this, um, because yeah, a minute ago I was doing the laundry. So I'm trying to lose weight. I'm doing, I've got a cold. It's all very boring and mundane, and I'm trying to write, which is, at the end of the day is just a job.
Yeah.
It is slightly odd, but it's nice, and you meet a lot of people doing it, which is lovely. Yeah, the only other bad thing is you sort of when you first get involved with Doctor Who, or you're first fan of Doctor Who, and you sort of hear the Nicholas Courtney anecdote. We all turned around. Everybody turned around. Everybody was wearing an eye patch. Or John Pertwee was be a Yeti on the loo in Tooting Bec or whatever. And the only thing is that you do actually find yourself doing that, because there's only so many times you can say you can't vary. How did you get involved in the world of Doctor Who?
Mm,
So you end up feeling like, I bet if you compared this to Jack's podcast, you probably could match them up, and I'd be saying the same words robotically for
mm.
how did I get involved in the world of Doctor Who? And then I met James Goss in the pub. So yeah, no,
Mm,
it is interesting. But for me, what I enjoy about doing anything like this is it's meeting people, and also selfishly, it's a slight ego boost, because
mm,
I've been struggling to come up with a script idea these last few days, and I did then start coming up with it earlier on. But also, it's very easy in the job to become downhearted. Is the sort of understatement version of it. But to suddenly think you can't write, I can't write, I can't think of a story, I don't know how stories work, I can't think of anything. Da, da, da. And when you do something like this, it does sort of remind you to go, no, you can, because you've
mm.
done it in the past. So
Yeah.
remember those other stuff you've done in the past, and go, well, actually, wait a minute, I can do this. So yeah, so it's
Yeah.
interesting.
It's kind of a trip down memory lane, if
Hmm.
you will. I mean, I think discussing what you do is a great way of kind of coping with burnout as a whole. And that's kind of my next
Hmm.
question, because that's a question I ask every guest who comes on the show, is about burnout and what it's like going through that and how you deal with it. Because I think it's such an interesting thing to ask creatives, because everyone has their own way of dealing with it. So what's your kind of process in that regard?
You mean like writer's block?
Yeah, writer's block.
Yeah. um it's very tricky, because it's one of those things where the advice you always give other people isn't the
Mm,
advice you take yourself. So the advice I always give other people, and it's the advice that worked, is just switch off your computer and go for a walk, go for a
mm,
bus journey, go do something else. And yeah, earlier on I went for a walk, bunged some early 2000s trance music on in my ears, and instantly went, oh, that's what it should be. That, oh, I've worked it out. Whereas I've spent days looking at my computer not doing that, and I'm so bad for obeying it myself. But yeah, it's absolutely, you've just got to stop trying so
mm.
hard, because you can't force it. And if you were doing any other job, you'd take a break.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes there's something about this job where you kind of forget to take a break, because it can be it is very all consuming, because writing isn't a job like not like any other, sorry, that's stupid. Writing is a job that's not like many others in
Yeah.
many other jobs. So I've had lots of office jobs, or things like that. There's progression, but you work 9 to 5, you do your best work, you might get promoted, you earn more money. The job might get harder, or it might get easier depending which route you go down. You progress, progress, progress. With this, 1 minute I'm doing 3 kids' TV shows at the same time, the next I'm unemployed. You know,
Mm.
technically, I'm unemployed at the moment, I think. I'm waiting to hear back from a couple of things, and I've got to send an idea in to get that confirmed, and I've not been contracted for it. So technically, I'm unemployed at the moment,
Yeah.
whereas last year I was constantly working on the TV show. So it can become slightly all consuming because you kind of feel like, well, it's 5 o'clock. Do I stop? No, I can't stop work for the day. And so everything I do is like I'm reading something, or I'm listening to something, consuming something, trying to do research, or whatever, or thinking of ideas and emailing myself ideas and things like that. And so that becomes all quite slightly overwhelming at times. And I think that's the same with the writer's block. Is it just
Yeah.
overwhelms you, and you sometimes have to go, there is other stuff going on in life. And genuinely, I find with the writer's block, the two fixes are either go for a walk and listen to some music, like literally get away from the computer, or speak to someone. And that's where a good script editor helps. You get that a lot in kids' TV. Every script editor I've had has been amazing. And they are so, a good script editor is like gold dust, because I will get. There was one of the scripts last year I got myself into knots over. It was like I cannot work out how this character is going to get from here to here and do this, because they need to make this happen for this character. And I said to the script editor, because obviously a lot of notes are dealt with on email now.
Mm.
Since COVID, you don't really have meetings all the time. And I said to my script editor, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, and I can guarantee 30 seconds into you talking will have solved it, because it just needed to, and it was. She literally went, "So what you need is A to make C do this. Okay, well, to do that, you need to change B. So yeah, instantly. And as soon as she started saying it, I started saying it along with her, because it was instantly fixed. And sometimes I think that's what you need to do. Is you just need to talk to your script editor or someone and say, "I'm really struggling. What do you think?" And yeah, it'll get fixed.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's so amazing about this industry is that there's always someone there to
Yeah.
back you up. There's always another writer who's struggling that will need a script editor, or there's always writers to talk to, and that's what I do when I'm struggling with writing. Is I turn to
Mm.
other writers. And when it comes to writing, how would you kind of describe your creative process as a whole? How would you kind of uh, describe how you go about doing it?
Uh, I mean, I'm bad. I panic. I basically will leave stuff to the last minute. I'll do a lot of thinking, and then suddenly I've not got long to do the rewrite. I'll work on sociable hours. I'm not great for that. There's some like Stephen Moffat's very good for. He goes and sits at his desk and does 9 to 5.
Mm.
Boom, sorted, and it's all plotted out beautifully. I'm not like that. So yeah, no, it's a lot of rushing around, panicking. But it gets there in the end. I don't think, it gets there in the end, hopefully. I do try and be more structured, but you just have to, it's kind of just who I am, really.
Mm. Yeah, I know. To be fair, I don't think I've ever met another writer quite like Moffat as a whole, like
Yeah.
someone who can sit there. I mean, I know quite a few writers who are very scheduled with all of their upcoming scripts and releases and their editing work. I'm very much not like that either. I'm very much, very much same in that sort of regard. But I think every writer has a unique process. I think everyone has a unique
Mm.
process. I think that's why I find it so interesting asking that on this sort of interview
Yeah.
podcast, specifically to writers. And is there any other role within the industry you've been interested in, or has it always kind of been writing?
Uh, I've directed some audio dramas,
Mm,
um, which I quite enjoyed. Uh, but I don't think that would be for me. I
mm,
don't think I've got the technical skill to direct. Um, I don't really necessarily think there is anything. I think there's things. I'm fascinated by set design,
mm,
especially. I find that's such a. I'll never forget the first time I walked into Gwen and Reese's flat, and it
mm,
was like walking into a real flat. It was like I
yeah.
just walked from. I know I'm in a giant studio. I know these walls are made of plywood or whatever they're made of, MDF, but I know I'm standing in someone's flat. And I find that a fascinating job of how do they decide
Mm,
there's a bit of slanting roof there. How do they decide what CDs they've got? I love stuff like I do love stuff like that. Um, but no, I think writing's pretty much the only thing I could do. So keeps myself to myself. I don't have to work with anybody.
Fair enough. I mean, you mentioned Gwen and Reese's flat. I absolutely love that set because of all the small details. I know there's a Billy Piper CD in the background as a
Yes,
sort of
all
Easter egg.
that. Yeah,
That one
yeah.
I see pointed out all the time, and I absolutely love small details like that. I'm currently working with production designers as part of my uni course at the moment, and I get to see into their minds, and it's great seeing people have that attention to detail in another
Yeah.
aspect of the industry. I mean,
Mm.
every side of the industry, everyone within the industry has a eye for detail because
Yeah.
everyone has to. But it's great seeing that from the perspective of that designer. Moving on to moving back to kind of characters, because there is one character I've been asked to ask you about in all capitals. Be sure to ask him about Yvonne Hartman. He writes her so well. Uh, oh, doorbell's going off. That's probably my sister coming home. But yeah, about Yvonne Hartman. If you needed that ego boost there, all in capitals from yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was. I mean, that just came about because Big Finish got the Torchwood. Yeah, I did. Yeah, no, so they couldn't remember for Fratelli. No, Big Finish got the license to do the Torchwood audios, and I said to them, I really, really need to do Torchwood. I love Torchwood. It is every part of my being. I need to write a Torchwood audio, and they came back to me and said I had a choice of I can't remember who it was. Two of the regulars from Torchwood 3 or Yvonne from Torchwood 1. And I was like, that would be amazing to write for Yvonne Hartman. Oh my God. And James Goss came back to me and said, well, if you want to do Yvonne, my rule is she's has a bad night out in Cardiff. And he said he was like, it should be. I want it to be fun. I want it to be a big fun bad night out in Cardiff, and that was really fun to do. I still got some character stuff in there, but that was really fun to do. Because you can just write her, because obviously I then wrote for her again from the Tortured One box set before
Yeah.
the fall, something like that. And yeah, she's great to write for because you can just write her and really enjoy writing for her as camp creature. It's basically Tracy Ann Oman camping it up. So it's really fun to do that. But also, I was keen to go. She has got dimensions. So I was very keen in the one rule that she spoilers, she finds out who the baddie is and she makes a deal with him because she's not Doctor Who, so she'll take, she'll do what's better for the bigger picture. But she stabs him, and she stabs him because she did like one of the people he killed. And for me, that was just a little bit of, she's not a total one-dimensional creature. She is a brilliant, really interesting character. And also, she's clearly the best character. She's clearly the main character. She's clearly the most competent character in all of Doctor Who and Torchwood. She's clearly the best. And I think Big Finish have done some great stuff with her. I was re-listening to one not so long ago. There's one called The Rockery, and it's about her and her mum. And it's brilliant. It's Tim Foley, I think. I haven't double checked, but I think it's Tim Foley, who's an excellent writer. And it's a truly, truly brilliant script. And it's a really, really brilliant insight into Yvonne and who she is and what she is when she's not at work. So she's great to write for and great to slightly, just explore, not make a, just camp, but to actually do a bit more. And also to show just how competent and brilliant she is. She is a genuinely brilliant woman, brilliant person at doing the job. She's by far a better leader of Tortured than Captain Jack.
Yeah.
Right there. He's
Mm.
useless. He's the worst leader of anything.
Oh,
And he's got
definitely.
sort of one in Yvonne. Yvonne knows everybody's names, and it's all a
Mm.
bit superficial, but she knows everyone's names. You
Yeah, I
know,
mean,
good.
Yanto's, well, more useful in Torchwood 1 than most of the time in Torchwood 3.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
he and they're all kind of, there's a layer of it's a job rather
Hmm.
than Captain Jack trying to make it into one happy family when it really, really isn't.
Very
But,
dysfunctional.
mm. And I want to talk about another aspect of mental health that's layered throughout quite a lot of your work. That is fear. Fear
Hmm.
is, I find, to be a huge part. Of course, the Nightmare Man is the go-to example there, but also the fear of being alone, the fear of being ignored.
Hmm.
Uh, even at one point during Market Berserker, Clyde is genuinely afraid of his dad. I mean,
Yeah,
it's and Master absolutely terrified me as well, as when listening to it. I had to listen to that the lights on.
yeah.
It was but I absolutely love it when the main character of a story is afraid. Those
Hmm.
using the Sarah Jane Adventures as an example, uh Day of the Clown, in particular, that episode, that scared the that just scared the hell out of me
Yeah,
growing up and gave me a fear of clowns. But I love it for it because it had that impact, because Sarah Jane was scared.
yeah,
And going back to the Nightmare Man, Luke, a character who's never been scared before, never kind of had that moment of weakness. I love how you awoke that within him, you gave him that fear, and it left an impact, obviously, because everyone like it. What was it like what's it like writing these characters afraid? What's it like writing fear as a concept into your scripts?
I think there is nothing interesting about someone who isn't scared.
Mm,
If you're not scared, you're not going on any kind of journey. Um, Overcoming fear, facing fear, accepting that you can be scared are all things that people should do. And it's a much more interesting dramatic journey
mm,
if Luke is genuinely scared and then
yeah.
realizes this is how that's the whole point of that story, obviously, is that,
Mm,
Luke is scared of going to university. Luke is scared of leaving home. Luke is scared of leaving his friends and his family. Um, and it's Luke having to go, I am strong enough to do this. And that's a much more interesting journey than Luke is, yeah, off. So yeah, I do like that. I think it's very important. I do think on the Sarah Jane Adventures, we were always very keen to make sure Sarah Jane wasn't perfect. Sarah Jane was scared.
mm.
Sarah Jane was prickly. Sarah Jane was secretive. She would break the rules. She's putting three kids in danger half her life. She's not,
Yeah.
she's not all sweetness and light. And Liz loved that. Liz didn't want to play
Mm,
her as perfect mum or anything.
yeah.
Um, and I think, yeah, it was very important on there. But I do think it's very important if it's to me it's part of the bedrock of most stories is people being scared.
Mm,
We're all scared. There's a lot going on to be scary about, so it's how do you live with that. I was scared during COVID. I might not see my
mm,
family again because they live in Yorkshire. I was scared that this might never end, and I was scared I'd never write again because I got
mm,
really bad writer's block or whatever. And so I had to face the fears of that. And how I faced the fears of that was going, well, I need to get positives out of this scary situation. So what are the
yeah.
positives I get? So I stopped smoking after 25 years of being a smoker. I grew herbs. So, things like that. I managed to write a script.
Mm,
I organized a movie night with friends online. It's finding the things. And I think that fear is such a fear is one of the hardest things for us because it stops us doing stuff.
mm,
So often we're scared of what might happen, so we
yeah.
don't do anything. Well, if you don't do anything, your story doesn't progress. So,
Precisely.
if I'm scared to go to university, well, don't go to university then. Fine. What have
Just
you
won't
achieved?
You won't
Nothing.
evolve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that, so for me, it is quite an important part of the storytelling process is that characters do need to be scared. Um,
Mm,
it's much more interesting and it's
yeah.
truthful for me. It's about getting the truth of, especially like Sarah Jane Adventures, it's getting the truth in, sometimes quite ridiculous situations.
And I think it's scripts like that, writing emotions like that, that make the writing process more human. It makes it a very human process. And looking at it from my perspective, I mean, last year I also went through a lot of writer's block, writer's burnout, because I lost my dad and the fear of mortality in a way. But then
Yeah,
through writing, through my work, through that, I turned the mortality aspect into a more fascination, a more, I think there's something in terms of how human a writing process can be. It can very much help people through their emotions and very well
yeah.
help people through their mental health through expressing it and helping others. And it's kind of an ongoing cycle in a way, I find.
Hmm.
And
But I think that's a big part of it. Is its life is just an ongoing thing.
mm,
There is no in real life. There's no endings until the final ending. Um,
mm,
so it's about dealing with this ever changing thing and the fears that could hold you back. It's about going,
mm.
well, let's not let it hold me back. Let's continue going. Yeah.
And I think that mindset definitely helps a lot of people. I think we turn to stories when we're at our lowest and
Hmm.
when we're at our happiest. And I don't think anyone would be writers if we didn't have those stories to see, if we didn't have those human stories, if
Yeah.
every character was confident all the time. Uh, Another example being the Seventh Doctor. He's
Hmm.
always 10 steps ahead. And what I love about Master and other Big Finish stories like Gods and Monsters is that it takes him out of his depth. It takes a
Yeah.
character that knows everything and is 10 steps ahead and treats everything like a game and takes him out of his depth.
Yeah.
I think that's why the Doctor works as a character, because you can still take a character like that out of his depth. What was it like to do that to Seven in particular? Because,
Yeah, that was
yeah.
interesting. Yeah, it was. I mean, the storyline was well, no, sort of my idea. I was given the story of the master had to be on an alien planet and he had to have lost his memory.
Mm,
And I wasn't overly keen on necessarily doing an alien planet because that's not necessarily. I am a bit more of a horror fan than a sci.
yeah,
No,
that's fair.
don't even like watching horror because it scares me. But I'm more a fan of psychological horror
Mm,
necessarily than I am of spaceships, for example. Um, and so I changed. Well, it's an alien planet, but it's sort of quite oldie worldy and gothic. And yeah, it was interesting. I wanted to give Sylvester the chance to sort of calm down,
mm,
to give him the chance so he could just sit and talk to someone, which is obviously what he does for pretty much the entire episode. It's just him
mm,
and the master talking, isn't it? It's a few years ago, so I'm trying to remember. So I wanted to give him the chance to do that, and then yeah, I wanted him, like you say, to totally have no power. I thought that was an interesting thing to do for, especially the Seventh Doctor. So there is only one solution at the end of the story, and is he going to say that? Is he going to accept that that's the only answer? Because he's now fighting literally the character of death. So by doing something like that, you can actually go, sorry, it's basically a god. You have no,
mm.
you cannot trick
Yeah,
it. You cannot overcome what deal you've made. Um, and yeah, so it's then interesting to go, well, what does he do? Um, how does he end it?
yeah.
I think if I remember rightly, he doesn't. I
Mm.
think
No.
the master ends it, or whoever the master's pretending to thinks he is. Does
Mm.
he end it? I think each makes the choice. I think because the Doctor's got no power, um, and then he gets taunted again in the framing sequence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love Sylv.
Yeah, I mean, Sylph has such range. I think
Hmm.
at the end of the day, I think I love it when I love hearing and seeing actors bring scripts to life. What's it like listening back, if watching and listening to your own stories? Because that's quite an interesting perspective. I can kind of imagine. Well,
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love it because you get to see what a lot of really talented people have done
mm,
um, with your stuff. So it always looks or sounds better than you thought it would because you forget just how talented and that everybody else is. So I always do enjoy doing that, and I usually will watch if I'm happy with it, we'll watch it 2 or 3 times in quick succession, over a couple of days or whatever, and then won't watch it again for years. So yeah, no, it is. I love watching it and
Mm,
listening to it, and just sort of trying to sort of go, what do I think worked, what didn't work, especially
mm,
when you're making television and you're doing other people's notes a lot more. What note should I have thought? But oh, look, pretty much every note was right. I should listen more. So no, I really love it because it's the whole point of telling the story is for the story to be seen or read or listened to. Um, that's the end point. That means you've done
mm.
it. You've tick done the job. Now on to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, talking of that and talking of like script editing earlier and writing in general, what's it like writing for different mediums? And in terms of script editors giving notes, what's it like that process when it comes to different mediums within the industry, so like audio novels, because you did the novelization of The Nightmare Man and the Torchwood Surgeon Adventures TV. Yeah, what's it like writing in different mediums?
I mean, quite mundanely, audio is just much quicker.
Mm, yeah.
The process of it is a much quicker process. You'll usually do 1 or 2 drafts. TV will do more than that. TV, there's a lot more people the notes are coming from. There's the channel, there's the production company, there's the executive producer, there's the script editor themselves. Eventually, a director comes on board, and you start getting notes from them. So, just mundanely,
Mm,
you TV is a lot more complicated. Um, Also, there's a lot more to be taken into account with TV. How many days can an actor do on location? Like the Madman in the Attic, Tommy, who plays Luke, could only do 1 day on location, which is why Luke's never at the beach. Luke goes to that
mm,
guest house, just stays there because Tommy was doing his GCSEs or something.
mm,
Uh, so there's a lot of that. There's a lot more of that. There's that character wasn't doing so well. The audiences won't respond to that character, so we want you to push that character, make them funnier. There's a lot more of that. Audio tends to be one person, maybe 2 people giving you notes, and tends to be over quite quickly. Maybe then audio can be a bit more personal.
mm.
Uh, I think perhaps audio is a bit more.
I think
It
you,
depends. It depends what the script
mm,
is. I mean, it
like
depends
you
what is being
mentioned with
to
like
do.
you mentioned earlier with like a full life, how like short trips in particular can be more personal, can be more
Yeah.
character driven than perhaps longer scripts, like a full four-part story where there's an ensemble that have to get from one place to the other. Um, do you think you kind of prefer writing short trips, or is there just a healthy balance of
No, yeah. I
both?
mean, yeah. There is a hard thing with TV is there are a lot of logistics, and especially I do, pretty much everything I do for TV is for kids TV. You've
Mm,
usually got a big cast,
yeah.
and because children, they tend to not work as many hours, so you tend to have a bigger cast. So you're trying to find ways to keep them occupied. You're moving them
Mm,
around. There's just the simple logistics of the show I was writing for last year is set during the school day while they're at school. Well, you can't just go off and do what you want. You're at school. Um, so you have to sit there and go, well, if I move that, and somebody will go, oh, that scene definitely should be at lunchtime. And you're like,
mm.
if I move that to lunchtime, that moves everything else because there were specifically morning lessons and now it's going to be easy. It's all complicated, which there tends to be a lot less of an audio. And certainly, yes, when you're doing something like a full life, it could be it's your world, it's a very it could be personal, and less less of the boring logistical stuff.
Mm.
um yeah.
So one of my final questions would probably be, it's what advice would you give to a writer who's just beginning? Uh, I know we've talked a bit about your beginnings as a writer and your process. What advice would you give to, and you've probably been asked that question so many times, but what advice would you give to a writer?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically the main advice is that you have to get out there and live your life. You have to experience life so you can write. um I don't believe the best writers are people who lock themselves away from the world,
Mm.
thinking I'm an undiscovered genius. I think I'll always remember at university, we came back after our first year, our first summer holiday, um, and we were quite small. It was a small uni, and the tutor asked everybody, "What did you do over the summer?" It was like school, really, and it went around the room, and people going, "Oh, made a short film. Oh, did this. Oh, did..." And it got to me, and I went, "Well, I worked in a restaurant, so I could afford to come back for second year."
Mm.
Um, and I was worried I was missing out on stuff. But actually, I look back at my writing. My uni final film is on my YouTube page. If you want to check it out, it's not, it's by no means, by no stretch of the imagination, a anything brilliant, but it's actually about something. Whereas actually, I look back at what a lot of other people did, and they tried to be the next Quentin Tarantino,
Mm.
who was the big director at the time, and because I experienced a lot more of the real world, I was writing a bit more about real worldy things, real emotions. I was delving a bit more, a bit more character led, which obviously is what I sort of ended up becoming a bit more of a character led writer. And I think that to me definitely puts you in good stead. If you get invited to a party, even if you're an introvert, go to the party if you can.
Mm.
Uh, get jobs, go out, meet people, meet friends of friends, get to know people. I love meeting new people. I'm instantly just like, I push my friends to one side and I'm like, tell me everything about you. Because I know about them. They've
Yeah.
introduced me to you. I want to know who you are. So I think do all of that. Practically just be ready to make notes as and whenever. It used to be notebook and pen. Now you've got your phone. You could have a notes app or whatever. I tend to just email myself, because if I email myself, I'll know it'll come up in my email and I'll know I want to get rid of it.
Mm.
Uh, so I then will put it in the Word document, whatever Word document it needs to be in. And the big thing now is, well, I found interesting, because the way I got into it is impossible. So Big Finish do a writing opportunity. So they're doing a new writing opportunity now for comedy.
Yes.
They do one writing opportunity every year because it's just impossible otherwise. So you won't find necessarily a huge amount of opportunities, I think, to get into the industry. What you can do is hone your craft so you're ready for those opportunities. So I would recommend going on Facebook or whatever and look for local writer actor groups. So I haven't, not for a while, I haven't done it since COVID. But I have an online one now. Me and a couple of mates. So I used to go to one called the South London Writers Group, where we
Mm.
used to once a month take a script, bring your scripts in, and actors would read them out. And those actors I ended up employing, and those actors ended up suggesting me things, because they call it networking. I don't call it networking. I call it making friends. I don't know how to network. I finally got business cards. I'm 45 and I got business cards the other week, because I thought if I go and meet somebody, I should give them a business card. And it's about doing that, and so being prepared to get feedback on your writing and taking that feedback on board. The person doesn't need to be a television script editor. It's if an actor says to you, I struggled over that line, look at that line and go, well, why did they struggle over it? Is it something I've done? And you don't really need to you don't need the actual formal structure of a writers group that you go to. Me and four or five of us, is it about four or five of us, um, started one during the pandemic, where
Mm.
we decided to have a Zoom every couple of weeks and just bring some writing. And everybody's at very different levels of their career, or not even one doesn't even want to be a writer. One just enjoys writing fun, has no interest in being a writer at all. And we all give each other feedback.
Mm.
And we perform it, and it's really nice. You sit there for an evening just reading people's scripts, and so there's only about four or five of us, and that's really rewarding. And also, that's quite nice to me because it forces me to do my non-needed work.
Yeah.
The work I've been commissioned to do,
Writing more for
not as a writer, is
yourself
right.
than
Yeah,
yeah.
is to try and find the time to explore what you want to do as a writer outside of that. And that's a good opportunity to do that. So I know, for example, we've got a meeting on Sunday and I need to do some writing before it.
Mm,
Regardless of anything else, I need to actually make sure I do. I've got a lot of boring admin stuff to do this week, but I have to put time to one side so that I do some writing for this group on Sunday.
mm,
So yeah, that would be my main two pieces of advice: is get out there and meet people and do things and travel and do whatever you can. Get a job, work anywhere, wherever you work, you meet people. And then also, yeah, just get writing and get listening to feedback on it. And I think that's the hardest thing to do, is
mm.
realizing that other people's notes, other people's thoughts are very valid, and they will make your writing better. You don't have to do everything, you don't have to listen to everything. You can argue, you can disagree, but you've got to be prepared to listen. Because if somebody says they didn't understand something, that's very, very probably your fault as a writer, not their fault for not listening properly. So, instantly
Mm.
you're making yourself a better writer. And then if you look out for the opportunities, such as Big Finish run an opportunity every year, go to the BBC Writers' Room website, sign up there for updates. They share all the competitions. There's so many competitions and things you can enter. There's probably more competitions for someone who hasn't been published to enter than there is for someone like me to enter. Quite rightly, it's about finding new writers. Look out for those, but in the meantime, hone your craft, make
Mm.
yourself a better writer, learn story structure, learn things, learn that it's not just I want to write Doctor Who or I want to do
Yeah.
this. There's a lot of work that goes into it. What's your character's wants? What's your character's needs? What's the inciting instance? Where are the turning points? You don't need to be. I'm never consciously aware of any of that when I'm writing. I don't sit
Mm.
there and what's my character's wants and needs. But I could look back at most things I've written and go, well, that's what the want is. That's what the need is. I can look back at it and go, there's the inciting instance at the beginning. And I could look back at it and go, there's the end of Act One. That's the end of Act Two. And I don't consciously think about that. I've learned it. It's a part of who I am. And that just only comes from writing and writing and writing.
Yeah. And there's an element of retrospect there and looking back at your previous work and realizing what you've done and improving. And that's a
Yeah,
brilliant way of putting it. The opening of your answer there about because we've discussed a lot about the human element, the humanity element when writing and living your life is very much a part of that. I fully agree. I think uh, if you take your life out of the equation, you take your experience is and humanity out of it, then it becomes an immediately less human process. You'll begin emulating others and just what
yeah,
you've seen. You won't have your own impact on the stories that you write. And it just becomes what I'd probably describe as, a kind of grey, empty shell of a story.
yeah.
You need that, you need to infuse your own experiences, your own humanity, your own friends, your own life into it. And I couldn't agree more. I
Hmm.
think that's a brilliant way of putting it. Sorry if you
Oh,
could hear the doorbell, by the way. Still going off.
oh,
I
right.
hope someone else here answers that.
So I've got a
Uh,
yappy dog somewhere around here, so I don't know if you can hear that, but
no,
oh, good.
all good. Yeah. So that was probably my final question, actually. Uh, yeah, it's been a pleasure bringing you back. Bring you back. It's been a pleasure bringing you onto the show and discussing all things Doctor Who and writing and etc.
Hmm.
etc. with you. And it's been amazing. It really has. And yeah, if you have anything to promote or anything, by all means, this is the time. So
Not really. I've just written just had a short film that's been made. Um, but yeah, no, if you really, where is it? I have a link tree page that I set up recently, which links to everything. Um, So it's
yeah.
linktr.ee/Joseph Lidster. But
I'll
it's on
put
my
that in the
Twitter page.
description.
So the top of my Twitter page, Joseph_Lidster. So there's the link tree link, which just takes you to various
Mm.
pages and my agent and my YouTube channel, which has got some stuff on it. But yeah, I've got that to promote, sadly.
Well, I'll make
Like
sure to
a
put that in
book
the
coming
description.
out or
Oh,
something. But I have a Rani story coming out. My Rani story
yes.
comes out in April, I think. Um, and yeah, hopefully there'll be other stuff coming
Mm.
soon.
Well, I'll make sure to put the link in the description.
Thank
and
you.
everything else and all the socials. And yeah, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks everyone for watching. Make sure to subscribe, etc., etc., etc. And
Mhm.
yeah, thank you. Bye bye, everyone. Bye bye. And stop.